Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
You are seeing the President of the United States. Look at the lines.
You join our movement.
A lot of President Trump supporters here.
Greatest movement in the history of our country.
As soon as Trump took office, where the gloves were taken off and you allow military leaders to actually win.
This is one of the first presidents in modern history, President Trump, that has stood up to China.
That he's truly a constitutionalist and that he's listening to the voice of the American people.
You should vote for the person who promises you something and then delivers. That's why I'm voting for President Trump.
We've seen border crossings drop significantly since President Trump came into office. We know that President Trump is a man of his word here in Arizona.
I love this president. He walks the walk, he talks the talk.
And I think with Biden, you're just going to end up going in the wrong direction with him.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Comes up. There's no magic wand for that, Donald. You can't just make it happen. Well, abracadabra, buddy!
They were obviously triggered.
Biden is clearly on a teleprompter.
This is why I wrote the book Triggered, folks. Okay, guys, we are back. By popular demand, the Triggered sort of video podcast went pretty well the last time. We had a good time. A lot of people responded, wanted us to do it again. So we're doing it again, and this time we have a pretty awesome, well-rounded group of guys to sit there and talk with us because we do have a lot to talk about. Today we got Jim Jordan, the incredible congressman. We got Tito Ortiz of UFC fame, and we got Rob O'Neill, the man that shot bin Laden in the face. And all of these guys are going to be relevant with what's going on in the past week. You have the 9th anniversary of the bin Laden raid. Rob, I've heard you tell that story, and honestly, truly one of the great storytellers. You do it so well. It's awesome. Certainly it's relevant, not just because of the anniversary, but honestly because the guy we're running against did not want to go in and kill the biggest terrorist in the world. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that, but a lot of stuff's also going on. We got Pulitzer Week. That should be interesting. While the journalists of the world award themselves prizes for usually getting it wrong, I'm going to wonder if there's going to be any accountability or any retracted Pulitzers for those who wrote about the Russia hoax and won incredible awards for literally getting nothing right. That's going to be an interesting one. A big one for me, and I'd like to hear everyone's opinion on this one. Certainly, Rob, you from a military standpoint, Tito, just as a good American, and Congressman Jordan, from your time on some of these congressional panels, the Flynn exoneration. I said it last week. I don't know who saw it or whatnot, but over the last 3 years, no one has ever said that I'm not loud, pretty aggressive, and that I'm afraid to take a position. My biggest regret of the last 3 years, I actually feel legitimately bad about it, was not taking a stronger stance on what happened to General Flynn. I was obviously a fan of his. I was obviously a friend of his, but it was one of those when you have every institution in the U.S. government saying he did X, Y, Z, he sold out this.
Oh, breaking news. ABC News' Brian Ross is reporting Michael Flynn promised full cooperation to the Mueller team and is prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yeah!
You sit back and be like, man, it doesn't sound like the guy that I know, but even with all of the crap that I had been through, all of the nonsense, and I think, Jim, you were on one of those panels, certainly with me, where they're trying to get me, not to the truth, but trying to get me to say that something happened at 12:03 p.m. when it actually happened at 12:02 p.m., so they could get me in a perjury trap. Yeah. But truly one of my big regrets of the last couple of years has not been being more vocal and more aggressive about what happened to Flynn. And as every day passes and we see more and more of this nonsense coming out, man, I got to hand it to his legal team for being like, what the hell? What's going on here? Like, we need more information. And Congressman Jordan, let's lead off with you on this one, because we got a lot to cover. But I mean, you're on these committees. What was going on at the FBI that they have? Not only did they do all this stuff, I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, that's insanity. You got to talk about that a little bit. But they've been sitting on this exculpatory evidence for 3 years. It's been there. It's obvious what it is. To anyone with a freaking brain, you know what's going on, and yet they didn't think, like, maybe we should bring this to light. Maybe we should bring this to Flynn's legal team. Maybe this whole nonsense, we should just end it all and let this guy go. But instead, they tarnished him. They drug him through the mud. He had to put a third mortgage on his house to pay his legal bills.
If you look at those notes from yesterday, that was total exoneration. These were dirty, filthy cops at the top of the FBI, and you know the names better than I do, and they were dishonest people. Now we have to see what's going to happen. But General Flynn was treated like nobody should, and I'm not talking about generals, I'm saying like nobody in this country should be treated.
I mean, what the hell is going on there, Congressman Jordan?
No, it's terrible, and no one knows this better than you and the president. I mean, what you had to go through, your entire family, the 20 hours you had to sit there and be interrogated when you had to come testify was ridiculous.
Almost 30, but who's counting? What's 10 hours of perjury trap between friends, right?
What they did to General Flynn, a 3-star general who served our country for over 3 decades. Rob would know this. I mean, this is terrible. Remember, on January 3rd, the Chuck Schumer goes on the Rachel Maddow show and says, because President-elect Trump at the time had said that they're spying on us. They've been spying on me and on the campaign. Chuck Schumer says, when you mess with the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
The very next day is the day Peter Strzok said, no. Even though the agents who investigated Flynn said there was nothing wrong and they were going to drop everything, Peter Strzok says, no, we're not going to drop it because I've talked to the guys on the 7th floor, better known as Jim Comey and Andy McCabe, and we're going to go after Flynn. 2 days after that, January 6th, is when they come up to Trump Tower and try to set up President-elect Trump. When Comey briefs him on the dossier after the intelligence briefing they give him, everyone leaves. Comey sticks around and briefs the president on the dossier that they already knew was false, was Russian disinformation, was salacious and unverified. Comey's words, not mine. And the dossier that they knew was paid for by the Clinton campaign. So they do that, and then just 2.5 weeks later is when they go in and set up Michael Flynn. When 2 guys go there and Comey's arrogant about it, he says, we just sent him over. We didn't follow the proper process. We didn't notify the White House counsel. We didn't do any of that. We just went over there and set him up. That's how bad this is.
The FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official. You would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals, and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
So, look, and with your point, Don, with Chris Wray, where in the heck has he been? He's been the FBI director since May, since Comey stepped down. He's been the FBI director. Why didn't we get this information? And you're right, we would have never gotten it, but for the work of Sidney Powell, Mike Flynn's lawyer, and the work of the Attorney General. Him putting Jeff Jensen, the U.S. Attorney in St. Louis, back on the case. He said, go look at the Flynn case again. That's why we got this information, not because of Christopher Wray. So we sent a letter to Christopher Wray yesterday asking for some documents and asking for access to some of these agents that we think we need to interview.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I know it's going to be an uphill battle, obviously, in the House, because you don't have control. And obviously, the Adam Schiffs of the world have been more than happy to weaponize those institutions for their political gain, which is all that's happened. And that's what's scary to me. I mean, as an American, as someone, again, who was, I don't want to say a victim, because I'm never going to consider myself a victim, even if I was probably the number 2 target of their, sham hoax. But that they would do this and then just try to protect the institution that's been clearly corrupted at the highest levels by these partisan hacks is really scary. I mean, Rob O'Neill, as someone who's sworn an oath to protect and defend this incredible country. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, a guy that's a, 3-star general that would get drugged through the mud, literally tried to destroy his life, his family, threatened him, essentially, coerced him into taking a plea because of the threats that they were going to do, and presumably go after his kid and all of the stuff that we're reading about these days. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It bothers me because it shows you how far some people on the left will take partisan politics. They forget everything about patriotism. They forget everything about the American people. They forget about a career of a general officer, a lieutenant general. Because all they want to do is they know that if they can destroy Michael Flynn, they can get after Donald Trump, and that's all they're doing. And it's so frustrating. And I talk to my own father about this pretty much every day. It's like, how does half of the country not see this? What they're doing, the Adam Schiffs of the world, the Nancy Pelosi, the Chuck Schumers, where Nancy Pelosi's over there in her house in front of a $15,000 refrigerator talking about her expensive ice cream when people are in food lines. It's almost, and I really wish we didn't have stuff like this where they would play party politics. It's like I always say, I never want another 9/11, but I do want another 9/12, because I really believe that's when we're together, and it is so sickeningly obvious that all they care about is personal power and their party. And if they're willing to try to destroy, not just try to, but destroy a man's life who was a general, who gave his life to serve this country, it's so frustrating. I'd like to give him a face-to-face and say, what are you doing to our great country? This is exactly what the founders talked about. We get into a two-party system that's that political. It's going to destroy the country, and you've seen it with the stuff with the Bin Laden, the stuff with 9/11, the stuff with the coronavirus. They're using it every single chance they can to try to get their party in power, and that's it.
Well, and by the way, you can see that. I mean, certainly. There's definitely been a sort of partisan hackery as it relates to the corona response, as it relates to everything. I mean, Tito, you're actually, you're in the People's Republic of California, but you're from Huntington Beach. I mean, this is where sort of the California revolution against this lockdown is going on. What's it like over there right now? As we take on yet another sort of adversary, this one invisible, but a scourge nonetheless.
I think the hardest thing is, as a civilian myself, is just supporting our president. And I'm seeing more and more support here in Orange County and in Southern California in general because of the things that our president is doing for this country. And then you have Nancy Pelosi who are just cutting the legs out from under this this state. Gavin Newsom is doing the same thing, letting child rapists out of prison because of a coronavirus. Well, the coronavirus should never get in the prison. But in general, here in Huntington Beach, there is a lot of people who do stand up for their rights. And we had these protests on Friday. There's probably a good 2,000 to 3,000 people down there. No one's wearing a mask.
Good.
I've been quarantined now for almost 2 months. My kids, I've been in the house for like almost 2 months. The incubation of this virus was supposed to only be 16 days. And like I say, now we're looking on 2 to 3 months. It's just a way, I think, in my strictly opinion, is to downgrade what Trump has really done for this country. And we need to revigorize this country again by letting our people work. And I think that's really important. And this is just coming as my opinion as a civilian. I've been to Iraq 6 times. I've gone and trying to help for our troops. I do as many things as possible for our people. And, when people say, well, you don't understand unless you serve for our military. Well, tell you on my social media, anybody follows me and you see what I post. I'm serving for my country because I'm putting my life on the line.
Well, you've done an awesome job. You've been a friend for a long time, but as someone of Mexican descent, Hispanic, happy Cinco de Mayo, by the way.
Thank you very much.
But from Southern California, in the limelight, you've done some of the Hollywood stuff. I mean, you've been really a vocal Trump supporter, and again, that can't be easy when you're in sort of again. The hotbed of sort of the Never Trump movement in the People's Republic of California. So I appreciate you doing that. And honestly, it takes guts to actually do that because you are putting part of your livelihood on the line.
I am. The safety of my livelihood. For the first time, I actually have handguns throughout my home just in case something does happen. But I shouldn't have to live like that. I never had to have firearms in my home ever until about 5 years ago. And, I did it just for the safety of my children, the safety of myself. My children understand handguns. They understand not to touch them. But like I say, at the end of the day, I'm an American with Mexican descent. I'm a fourth-generation Mexican from California. And people who do come to the United States, they come here for safety. They come here to be able to progress as human beings in life and live this American dream. And your father has been one of the ones who made this American dream possible. And I look at it, I was a kid that lived on the streets who came from nothing. You know, my Democratic family. My mom's a full-blooded Democrat, and I can't sit and explain to her many, many times of what the Republican Party is trying to do. You know, we're trying to make it strong from within the middle and then spread it outside instead of taking care of the whole world and not worry about the United States. For once, we have a president who is doing that I'm very thankful that we have Mr. Trump doing this for our country.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm with you in the sense that, I want to get back to work, too. I want to put people back to work. I mean, that's what we do. We're actually business people. I would say, unlike Hunter Biden, we actually did international business before this. Unlike all of the Bidens who've been, we actually did these sort of things. We actually employ people. My father's actually signed the front of a paycheck for thousands of people for decades. We want to go back to work, but you're right. Nancy Pelosi is busy eating out of her $25,000 freezer ice cream. I mean, her Nancy Antoinette moment was really something.
This is chocolate, and then we have some other chocolate here. We just got to restock the ice cream.
But, Congressman Jordan, isn't it time for Congress to also get back to work?
Yes.
I mean, I feel like they're so out of touch. For someone like her, and they're worth hundreds of billions, they can just lock themselves away, in their gated houses. And, other people need to work. And trust me, guys, I understand the irony of the son of a billionaire from New York City. How is it possible that I understand this and the Democratic thought leaders have no idea what I'm talking about? How is that possible? In what parallel universe do we live that, again, the son of a billionaire totally gets this and wants to get back at it and, put our people back to work and get them their paychecks and help grow the economy again. But the Democrat leaders in the House don't. And they're just going to, they're going to sit back and quarantine themselves and be hidden away for weeks, months. Hey, why don't we just shut down the world for years for a virus that, while very seriously, still has a death rate of about 0.0003% or something? Congressman Jordan, I mean, I imagine you're one of those guys that wants to get back to work. What the hell's going on in Congress?
No, you're exactly right, Don. We've been talking about it for weeks. It's time for Congress to get back to work. Look, farmers are planting crops, truckers are moving goods, grocers are stocking shelves, frontline healthcare workers have not missed a day in the last 7 weeks. They've been busting their tail, doing their job, helping the country. But somehow the U.S. Congress can't go back to work. It is ridiculous. And it's the thing, and Rob was getting this too, it's the thing that drives Americans, probably drives them crazy more than anything else. It's the double standard. You see it with the FBI. One set of rules if your name is Comey and McCabe and Strzok and Page. Different set of rules for us regular folks. Same thing here. One set of rules for hardworking farmers and truckers and grocers and healthcare workers and police officers and firemen. One set of rules for them. Oh, but a different set if you're Nancy Pelosi and you're one of the elite leaders in the United States Congress. And that is just complete BS. Americans are sick of the double standard. We're supposed to be equal treatment under the law. It's the same for all us Americans. You get it, as you described, and you come from a different background than most people. You get it. The president certainly gets it. He's been busting his tail working 18 hours. I know how long a day he's been working.
Oh, yeah.
My best buddy.
The last time he called me was
staff.
from the Oval Office at midnight. At midnight.
Exactly.
He's still in the Oval.
Exactly.
And by the way, you get it as it relates to the double standard because it's something I talk about a lot. Do you think that if I lied to your committee, under testimony like McCabe and these other guys, that literally it's known that they lied now? I mean, do you think that I'd be sitting here doing a video conference with you, or do you think I'd be quarantined away somewhere in Rikers Island?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, the way the double standard, the way they handled this entire thing was so terrible. And now, look, we sent a letter today. We sent a letter today to Adam Schiff saying, release the transcripts that your committee voted to release, and you haven't released them yet. Now, remember, Adam Schiff is the same guy who gave the phone number of the president's personal attorney. He's the guy who gave the phone number of of a member of the press, and he's the guy who made public the phone number of a Republican member of Congress. But he won't even release the transcripts of all the interviews he did so we can finally get to the bottom of all this. He won't even release that, even though his committee voted to do so. That's
well,
how
by the
bad
way,
it is. And
my
people are sick of
transcripts
that
are
double
part
standard.
of that, but so are
Yes, exactly.
Sally Yates, all these other, all the crazy lefties are part of
Susan
that. So I
Rice,
said, hey,
Sally
release
Yates, yeah.
mine too, guys. I'm happy having it out there. I'm happy letting America scrutinize it. Again, he's also the guy that, seemed that every leak that came out of my testimony happened during the bathroom breaks that he called immediately. I got out of, testimony after, 9.5 hours. I looked through Twitter. I'm saying, oh, Donald Trump Jr. said this at 10 a.m. Saying, how do they know I said that at 10 a.m. from what was supposed to be, a closed door thing that was supposed to be, secret and everything like that. And he's the only guy that wanted to do a bathroom break every 25 minutes. So
I guess the only thing is they were talking about why didn't I give the information to Adam Schiff and his committee? And the answer is because I think Adam Schiff is the biggest leaker in Washington. You know that. I know that. We all know that. I've watched Adam Schiff leak. He's a corrupt politician. He's a leaker like nobody's ever seen before.
I wonder where it came from. Well, hey guys, hold on one second. We're going to go to break, but we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about Joe Biden's foreign policy and the bin Laden raid with the guy that got it done. So hold on one second and we'll be right back.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message. My administration will take all necessary steps to safeguard our citizens from this threat.
Hysterical xenophobia.
Giving Americans a false sense.
Is it accurate that if these steps had not been put in place, it could have been 2 million people dead here in the United States?
Yes. No matter how hard they try to stop us, they can't. We built the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and we're going to do it again. Together, we're beating back the invisible enemy.
What the federal government did was a phenomenal accomplishment.
Through it all, the world has witnessed the unyielding resolve of our incredible American people.
Promise made, promise kept.
And I'm fighting for you, and I love doing it with everything that I have. And you know that. With the grace of God, we will win this war, and we will win this war quickly. And we will make America great again.
We choose truth over facts.
All right, guys, we're back. Triggered Video Podcast with a couple incredible guests. You know them all. I think the one thing we can say they all have in common is they are fighters, both figuratively and literally. They are fighters from their history. Rob O'Neill is a SEAL, Tito as the UFC, but not everyone knows, and I think most know, that Jim Jordan was one of the great collegiate wrestlers of all time, went back and coached at Ohio State for years, and I know personally that Jim is a badass because a very close friend of mine, one of my very good buddies, Brendan Burns, you probably remember him, Jim, actually wrestled for you at Ohio State, and when I said, hey, when I was just getting into this stuff in the politics, I go, so what do you think of Jim Jordan? He goes, you don't want to mess with Jim Jordan. When he was coaching, so not even wrestling anymore, you'd suit up and wrestle and take down the heavyweights and what you weigh at the time as a coach, not necessarily, probably in peak, and you'd destroy the big boys. That sort of made everything very impressive for me right off the bat. So we definitely got a whole set of fighters. But this past Friday was really cool. It was the 9th anniversary of the bin Laden raid, and a good buddy of mine, Rob O'Neill, is here. He's the guy that actually pulled the trigger to take out that piece of garbage. Rob, tell me a little bit about it. What's the anniversary mean to you? What are your thoughts leading into that? And I know you have a couple incredible stories just, from the day itself, as well as I've seen you speak about it a bunch since then. You do an awesome job with it. So, tell me a little bit about it.
The anniversary is always special because, again, that was one of the times where America really came together. We had a Democratic administration, but we had Republicans in there too. Secretary Gates was in there, and Admiral Mullen. And it was a point where most people in the administration and in the government realized it's time to not be partisan, and we really need to go get Osama bin Laden. And I was able to golf on the anniversary and just kind of reflect. I was golfing by myself, and I just remember thinking about, tonight I'm gonna pour a glass and give a toast to the pilots that flew us in there. What an amazing Army unit, best pilots in the world, and their air crew that were opening the doors for us, and all the intelligence people who were able to find Osama bin Laden. Years of looking for him, and just think about the badasses that were in the house with me. I just remember thinking, because of, everything went wrong, and I hope Tito would agree with me that, you have a perfect plan until you get punched in the face. We crashed in the front yard. We had guys everywhere. And just based on where I was let off, I was able to kind of be in the back and just watch cool guys do cool stuff. And it was just so awesome to watch, knowing the house should blow up at any time, but everyone was doing what they do. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And I was able to go into bin Laden's bedroom simply because of one really brave guy in front of me. He went one way, I went the other. This was Osama bin Laden. And it was never me. It was just the team, the entire team, all the way back to the very first part of intelligence, particularly a group of women that found bin Laden. And I always say, too, like, the pilots are the coolest guys there because, they fly smooth, they fly fast, they fly low, they fly on time. I was always smart enough to, carry a sledgehammer and a gun. That's basically all I did.
You always do a really good job of, really giving everyone the credit, and that's what's so cool about it. I mean, awesome. For those of you watching, watching Rob tell the story, I mean, from start to finish, is really amazing. But I love that you don't just sort of hoard all that glory for yourself. I mean, you're so good about literally everyone who's been involved. You're talking about them, and you're talking about the pilots. I always love sort of the story that's when it's all done and you guys are flying back and you're just sort of waiting to get back into, let's call it, a little bit safer airspace. Counting down the minutes, not knowing if they're going to shoot you out of the air because you went in, I guess controversially, although I'd say for the billions of dollars in aid we give to Pakistan, they should probably be okay with us going into their airspace. You sort of can't have it both ways, in my opinion, but that's not necessarily the way it's worked in sort of bureaucratic government. But that's been awesome. Now, Rob, what are your thoughts on the fact that it seems, and I don't know, maybe it's just revisionist history, but it is known that Joe Biden did not want to go in on this thing. Now, I can't name another American that wouldn't want to. I can't imagine that anyone on the mission that the operators, the pilots, the line cook, wouldn't have wanted to go in and take out this piece of garbage. Yeah. What do you think it was in Joe Biden's mind, or maybe what's left of it? Because, I imagine he was more lucid then, 9 years ago than he is today, because it's been a really, pretty bad downward spiral. But talk to me a little bit about, what could possibly be going through someone's mind to even think that?
Oh, I mean, I think, that's almost 4 decades of politically making bad decisions on Joe Biden's part. Like I mean, even for the guys that accepted death, we're not doing it for ourselves. And this is what we all signed up for. And even if he's not there, let us go in and find out, and let's fight it out and see what we find out. Because the people in the towers, the people on Flight 93 that fought Al-Qaeda very first, the people in the Pentagon that died on 9/11, they deserve it. They're worth it. And that's what we're here for. Mm-hmm. And if I die this night, what an ending. But I'm going for this country. I'm going for every not even just the country, but for our entire idea, the entire Western world. We're going in for them. And let us do it. And for someone just, if we would have bombed it, we never would have known if he was there, and Al-Qaeda would have lied to us, because it turns out they lied to us. Let us go find out. We're fighters. You trained us. You spent this much money on us. Let us go. Everyone down, like you said, down to the alternates, the guys that didn't even go on the mission, they're going to go down to the other helicopters we had there. Everybody wanted to go, and even a lot of people don't know this. When we had to blow up one of our helicopters because we crashed, we were rescued by another team from SEAL Team 6, by other pilots, because they're there too. They're flying in. They don't have the technology that we have. They put their butts in the seats. They should get shot down. Everybody wanted to go except Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of shocking. I mean, Tito, as a fighter yourself, I mean, do you think Joe Biden has that fight mentality? I mean, I think no one's going to question that, Donald Trump probably likes to fight. I think I got a little bit of that gene, certainly as it relates to politics and just getting in it and not being afraid. But I mean, do you think he has that? Because I mean, I literally, as an American, literally putting aside any kind of partisanship, and I know that's not easy to do these days, but I can't imagine anyone saying, let's not go get this guy. To your point, Rob, even if he's not there, like, we got to find out. We've spent a decade plus, putting this together. If he's not there, so be it. But if he's there, we got to take this guy out and, show the world that we mean business. Tito, what do you think about that? Because, again, I know what you do and what you've done for your whole career isn't easy. Getting in the ring like that, fighting. I mean, do you think that someone that could make that decision has that fight that we're going to need, basically coming out of the coronavirus, coming out of this pandemic that has destroyed the economy, that has put so many people? Do you think Joe Biden's a fighter?
I do not think Joe Biden's a fighter. I think he's been a puppet since day one. I mean, he's been in this government now for 37 years, and nothing has changed.
Almost 50.
Why all of a sudden it's going to change now? I mean,
nothing's
going to change.
It's sort of hard to believe.
Fired. I think he's making mistake after mistake, and the public's going to see who Joe Biden truly is. And your dad just makes him look really, really, really bad. I mean, I don't understand it, but like I say, over this last 4 years, I really had to educate myself on politics, and I have, thanks to your father, because working for your father on the Celebrity Apprentice, I want to know what his true attitude was. And when I first met him, he was the most courteous, honest. Spend every second I asked, just asking questions about him. Anybody else who's a billionaire would just shun me off and not even ask a question or answer a question. But your dad was there doing that.
The fact is, the Kodak executives loved what you did. Hydra, you win. They thought you were terrific. You also happened to raise the most money. So, Tito, yes, you're going to be getting $20,000 for your favorite charity. Fantastic.
Well, my charity, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, is for cancer research. Being a celebrity is, only paper deep. But being a real person is skin deep and blood deep, and that's what it really comes down to, is trying to help out children and make sure they have a future.
Now, as far as Joe Biden, I mean, this guy has just made mistake after mistake. His son has made mistake after mistake. If this was your father and you guys probably be going to jail right now. But hey, listen,
without question. You're right. I think it really does speak a sort of judgment. Or perhaps the lack thereof. I'm pretty sure I know the answer. I don't have to ask Jim Jordan if he would have gone in or not. I have a feeling, I know the answer. But Congressman, I got to ask you, as we're talking about these sort of things and judgment, you see the media doing whatever they can to protect Joe Biden. The Biden papers at the University of Delaware. They're literally TV pundits and other Democrats saying that the Biden papers, from his 50 years as a career politician in D.C., right? He's not, blue collar, Joe, like they try to play. I mean, he's been a politician and a bureaucrat for 50 years. They're saying that his papers at the University of Delaware are not relevant because it could maybe help you make a judgment about Joe Biden, when even his own people, I think this was Obama administration people, said that Joe Biden's been on the wrong side of history on literally every decision he's made. But I'm wondering, Jim Jordan, if Brett Kavanaugh's high school yearbook is relevant and his high school yearbook is totally fair game, because I remember what's in my high school yearbook. If that's fair game, how can the Biden papers at the University of Delaware, from his time as a quote-unquote public servant, though he seems to be getting everyone else in his family really rich as a public servant,
but why not reveal your Senate documents that are being held in Delaware? I know there's 1,800 plus boxes. But if she believes and she alleges that the complaints may be hidden there, why not strive for complete transparency? Why was the access to those documents sealed up when they were supposed to be revealed?
Well, they weren't supposed to be revealed.
How can that not be relevant? What's in there that's so bad that they're so afraid of it? And why shouldn't the American people see it?
We're back to the same point, the double standards. I mean, think about what your families went through. They want every single business record, every single tax record, I'm on the oversight committee. I know all the things that the subpoenas and things they've sent out about your family. They want to go to your accounting firm and get everything. So what the president
I think my 5-year-old daughter is actually theoretically part of that subpoena. They want her banking records. Think about this. My 5-year-old
so
Chloe,
crazy.
you know her from Instagram. She's very aggressive, very cute, but probably not a lot in her banking records. She's 5, but those are legit and totally fair game. They can attack Barron Trump. When he was 11, 12, 13, they can attack him ad nauseum, but I'm not allowed to go after Hunter Biden, who's 50. I can't attack the child of a candidate who's 50 and who's been tied to the Chinese government with $1.5 billion invested from the Bank of China directly into his hedge fund. Now, for those of you watching, that's $30 million in fees a year, in the typical, 2% management fee plus 20% of the profit. So assuming he's not that good an investor, he still gets a 2% management fee on $1.5 billion. That's $30 million a year. You have the Ukraine stuff. You have the Romania stuff. It never ends with this guy. But he's totally off limits. Was I off limits, Jim, when your committees were trying to throw me in jail? Because I don't remember being off limits.
I remember the 80 letters Jerry Nadler sent out, the fishing expedition he went on 2 years ago. This is how bad it is. So, look, everyone gets it. Anyone with any type of common sense, any type of just objective look at things understands what you went through, what the presidents went through, which, frankly, started before he was president. We never forget, it started in July of 2016 when they spied on 2 American citizens associated with President Trump's campaign. That's when it started. And everything that's happened since then, the Trump-Russia investigation, the impeachment, now this, on and on it goes. What they did with Michael Cohen, what they did with Mazars, your accounting firm, everything else, every subpoena, every letter, it's nonstop. And most people get it that this is not fair. And yet, in spite of all that, this is the beauty of it. In spite of all that, prior to this virus hitting the country, look at what had happened in 3 years under the president's leadership. Taxes cut, the economy growing, lowest unemployment, economy moving, stock market up, 2 great Supreme Court justices out of the Iran deal, embassy in Jerusalem, hostages home from North Korea, and on. And I'm forgetting a new NAFTA agreement, and on we could go. All that happened in spite of a relentless attack from the left, a relentless attack from mainstream Democrats, and frankly, some Republicans, and certainly a relentless attack from the mainstream press. And yet we're getting things done. That's why he's going to win. That's why it doesn't matter if it's Joe Biden or someone else. President Trump is going to win because the American people understand how hard he's been working and how much progress we have made in 3.5 years.
Well, I think that's certainly right. And, I think it's sort of a no-brainer, which also makes me wonder with some of these shutdowns and sort of, again, I get that there are places that need to remain shut down. But, if a city in a state that's, tens of thousands of miles, square miles, the city maybe hold it up. But, from New York, right? Obviously, New York City is the sort of the American epicenter, of the disease, and it's a big place and yada, yada, yada. But why are little towns in upstate New York totally shut down, told you can't support those businesses? I mean, do you think there's something to it, especially it seems like in the liberal states, that they're sort of okay with destroying the economy and these people's jobs because they believe that will hurt Trump? Because, I mean, it certainly feels like it's starting to get political. I don't know why you have to shut down an entire state. I can understand why you shut down a town or keep a town a little bit more, closed up than others. But if people are exercising common sense, basic hygiene, it seems like there's a lot of places that are shut down that could be opened back up pretty quickly.
Yeah, no kidding, especially since there's some businesses that have never shut down. So why in the world can't other businesses now open up and follow the same protocols, the same guidelines, engage in the same processes that those businesses that have been deemed essential and have never shut down? It is just common sense. And business owners get it. American people get it. So let's open this thing up. Nancy Pelosi's talking about phase 4, phase 5, whatever the next bill is going to be. Why don't we make phase 4? Let people go back to work, for goodness sake, and just exercise common sense. And you're exactly right. Western Ohio, where I'm from, is not the same as Manhattan. Western Ohio is not even the same as Columbus, Ohio. So let lots of areas in the country open up yesterday, and then we can phase into these other areas. That's the common sense plan that I think makes sense. And also, during this whole process, and this is another another kudos to Bill Barr. The threats to liberty we're seeing in some of these states. I mean, Tito knows this in his state, where the mayor.
Don't even get me started. I mean, when I see them arresting pastors for doing church services where people are staying in their cars, but they literally are releasing pedophiles.
They are giving a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Orange County DA Todd Spitzer outraged over the recent court-ordered release of these 7 inmates he calls high-risk sex offenders. They were let go starting on April 7th, citing concerns over COVID-19.
We do not want these people out on our streets because we all know that sex offenders have the highest propensity to commit additional offenses.
And that appears to be exactly what happened.
I mean, they want to clear prisons, okay, to prevent prisoners who may be in there for molesting children. They want to let them out into society. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? I mean, you see some of the stuff, right? A murderer is released. He's back in the next day for killing. Who could have seen that coming? They're arresting pastors, but releasing pedophiles and releasing other prisoners into society. I got it. If you're in jail, how about this? Why don't you self-isolate in your cell? Maybe if you're a prisoner, rather than giving them better treatment than the rest of Americans, why don't they give them a little bit worse if they're looking out for their interests? I mean, is this what's missing in Washington and frankly America and in our thought processes, that we think it's smarter to release criminals to save them rather than to maybe restrict them a little bit more? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's literally asinine. You know, Rob, you come from middle America, in what we call Butte, America, also known as Butte, Montana, but they referred to it as Butte, America. I mean, is this kind of just nonsense, this total lack of common sense? Is this going outside of the main cities, or is this a New York and California thing? Is it happening in Montana too? Because if it is, it's pretty scary, because I would be all for locking criminals up, leaving them in the cell. You know what? You can find someone who will pass them food, but releasing them into society to protect them from coronavirus is probably not the right plan. And by the way, probably increases their odds of getting it versus leaving them locked up in a cell for a couple more weeks. I don't know. That's just me.
It doesn't make sense at all to me. And sometimes I see stuff on TV and the mainstream media that, down is up, up is down. I mean, I have no problem putting these guys in their cells and feeding them nothing but pancakes because that'll slide under the door. Just letting them out because they're I mean, sex offenders, there are people that have been arrested 3 times in the same day and get released. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I just question what's the thinking going on here? Does someone hate this country that much that they want to act like this, and we get to put them in charge? And scarier, someone elected them. It's scary when you see the. Nothing but love for the law enforcement, but a lot of law enforcement, they're getting this power trip because they're being told by elected governors that they can go over there and arrest someone or harass them, take their name down. Notice that we've been documenting this because your daughter had a play date. There's still the First Amendment in this country, and a lot of people are losing it, but they're being told by people in power that shouldn't be in power, like the governor the mayor of Chicago saying, "You don't make us treat you like a criminal. First of all, you work for us." What is going on here? I mean, the pandemic's horrible. I don't want to see anyone get sick. But come on, people are getting power hungry, getting power crazy, and a lot of people are just. They're buying into it because they're being told again by certain elected officials that freedom's not going back to work. Freedom will be the government paying you to not work, which
we, have this discussion about going back or reopening. I think a lot of people should just say, no, we're not going back to that. We're not going back to working.
It's a really good point. And I mean, Congressman, I'd like to hear your opinion on this because I definitely see some of this stuff. Now I see plenty of guys, and we love law enforcement, and all that they do. And many of these guys are basically saying, hey, we're not enforcing these things because this is just flagrant. Right. I mean, they've tried doing it, with the gun stuff in so many states, and people are just saying, no. The local sheriff is like, we're not enforcing, the downstate New York asinine regulations on the Second Amendment in upstate. Now, but I definitely see certain areas where these politicians are grabbing this power under the guise of doing what's good for you. Like, Do you think they ever released that power? Because I know there's one thing about politicians. They're not so apt to give back, power. All these people who've spent the last 4 years saying that Donald Trump is going to be a dictator, I don't know. He's done a pretty good job sort of following the federalist mantra of letting the states decide. He's not going in there and overruling governors. He's saying you got to do what you want. But I see it on the state level, on the town level, on the county level. Yeah. I mean, there's a power grab that these people are really enjoying in many cases. I really applaud some of the law enforcement who's basically taking some of the most egregious cases of these things. There may be some where it makes sense. I'm not saying it's a blanket, sort of answer, but I applaud some of the law enforcement. Like, yeah, we're not arresting people for going to church. We're just not going to do it. I don't care what the governor says or whoever says, so I applaud that. But what do you see, in government? Because everything that the Democrat platform has been about control. You heard Clyburn say it a few weeks ago. We're never going to let a good crisis go to waste. This is a great opportunity to get vote by mail.
And many states have said we want to stop people from purchasing a firearm and stop people from going to church. That is crazy. And Bill Barr is saying enough of that. The president said, no, that's not how it works. And we all have to trumpet that and say, look, this First Amendment. Here's another one that was funny. They were filming people being fined at a church service on Sunday. So people were being fined for exercising their First Amendment right to assemble, their First Amendment right to practice their faith and practice their religion. But I wonder if the press got fined for exercising the freedom of the press that's also in the First. I didn't see the press who were filming it get fined. So what? Only some First Amendment liberties are in jeopardy, not all? So that is why this is so dangerous and why we have to protect all liberty.
Well, I put up an interesting sort of tweet about that, last week when you had Mayor de Blasio in New York sort of attacking the Jewish community there, basically saying, hey, you guys are going to be arrested. But what was it, 4 or 5 days before that, for one of the Muslim holidays. And again, I'm all for religious liberty for everyone. But it was interesting to see they're accommodating sort of one faith and issuing summons and arresting people of another faith. And it's sort of interesting, from the party that loves to call everyone, fascist and, other words that I won't even talk about relating to some dictators from, Europe in the past. They love to scream that about Donald Trump really quickly and at a moment's notice. But when they themselves are acting like the fascists, they're pretty quiet about it.
How about the Mayor de Blasio and Mayor Garcetti, two of our largest cities, both saying, Mayor Garcetti said snitches will be rewarded, and de Blasio set up a hotline where you could call in and rat out your fellow citizens for simply going to the park or going to church or something, exercising some freedom.
When you see a crowd, when you see a line that's not distanced, when you see a supermarket that's too crowded, anything, you can report it right away so we can get help there to fix the problem. And now it's as simple as taking a photo. All you got to do is take the photo and put the location with it and bang, send a photo like this, and we will make sure that enforcement comes right away.
That is scary.
That reminds me of that sounds a little bit more like the SS, than something in America. Now, Tito, some of that's going on in your backyard. I mean, what have you seen there? What have some of your friends said about that? Because, I saw that. I mean, I was like, oh my God!
Well, in the beginning when this first started,
he tweeted that. He actually said it. I thought it was like a parody account for a little bit.
And doctors, and
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tito. What you've seen it up close in California going on with that. What are your thoughts on it?
I went out of my way in the beginning of this pandemic first started. And I really want to just help out my community, and the way to do that was to go on social media and tell people stay home. Well, this was 2 months ago. Now, as soon as it gets more and more, it just seems like people don't really want to stay home anymore because they're not sick. The pandemic is not that bad here in Orange County, even in California in general. And this is my opinion. I'm not a doctor, but my friends who are in medication for it, they say, no, we're not going to give them that medication unless they're on a ventilator. That doesn't make sense to me. They want to make this pandemic worse than what it is to attack our president, and it is horrible. Gavin Newsom giving an opportunity of giving money to illegals, my tax-paying money.
And regardless of your status, documented or undocumented, there are people in need. And this is a state that steps up always to support those in need, regardless of status.
And believe me, I take a huge pay cut for my taxes that I do. And I have no problem doing that because I'm American and I'm proud of where I live. I'm proud of how I live for my kids and so forth. But when illegals are getting my money, I have a problem with that. I have a big problem.
Well,
with
listen,
that.
I agree with that. That's something I've said for a long time. Americans, taxpayer dollars should go to help Americans. And once we solve our problems and once we get through our plenty of issues and once our kids, aren't, 28 or 30, in the world in terms of education, while we spend more per kid than any country in the world, once we solve those problems, I'm happy to help out everyone. It's sort of like, when you get on an airplane, they don't have a problem saying, hey, in the event of an emergency, put your oxygen mask on before helping those around you. It's okay there. But, what's harder for me is, hey, if you want to do those things under normal times when we're in the greatest economy of the world, 2 months ago, you know what? I can almost understand it a little bit better. But when so many Americans are out of work, when so many businesses are suffering, we're still going to take money that could go back to pay back that guy who's been paying taxes, that lady who's been paying taxes their entire lives, and we're going to give it to someone that we may not know if they're doing anything. For all we know, they could be taking it, sending it back home, whatever it may be. But American taxpayer dollars in a time of crisis should be spent on Americans more than ever, in my opinion. And so, I think everyone feels the same way. But we got a bunch more coming up. Let's take one more break, and we will come back with this pretty good panel. I'm liking it. We're having some fun. So thank you guys for joining us, and stick around. We'll be back after commercial.
I'm ready to go.
This is a crisis.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia.
Biden's son inked a $1 billion deal with a subsidiary of the Bank of China.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks.
Since the outbreak, the Communist Party has been mobilizing overseas organizations to buy local supplies and send them to China.
It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. What a beautiful history we wrote together. Banning all travel will not stop it.
The president is right. That travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time.
That was a very smart move right there.
Hysterical xenophobia. Xenophobia. I complimented him on dealing with China. I'm not going nuts.
And we're back. So, guys, what do we want to talk about now? I think, one of the topics that I sort of hit on, but, since we got sort of the fighter panel, I do want to get your thoughts on this. Obviously, we're figuring out, wasn't rocket science. We knew it from moment one, that this virus started in China. It came from China. China lied and or bought off the World Health Organization to minimize the threat to the outside. They shut down travel from Wuhan to Beijing and Shanghai, their major cities, before they shut down travel to the rest of the world.
Have you seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And I think that the World Health Organization should be ashamed of themselves.
What do we do about China? And can we keep sort of living under this lie that China is going to try to be a world player, that they're going to try to do what's right for anyone other than China? What are your thoughts on all of that and sort of how the mainstream media has run with the Chinese government communist regime talking points over our own governments? Let me hear your thoughts on that, Rob. I'd like to, as someone who's been on the front lines of this, and it's a sort of different kind of war. But if China, in my opinion, I've said this publicly, if China spent a little bit more time maybe trying to feed their people than steal our military technology than to steal our innovations from our private companies, if they spent a little bit more money trying to feed their people rather than doing that and trying to be a dominant force in the world, maybe people wouldn't have to eat bat. And therefore, maybe we wouldn't be spreading these pandemics. And then we can get into the side of the Wuhan lab and all of that nonsense, and that our government is paying the Chinese government to be doing biological warfare experiments, whatever the hell it is. Who the heck knows what you're actually getting. But I think the one thing that this pandemic has shown us is that Donald Trump's sort of stance on China, the first guy to actually try to renegotiate a trade deal and get it done, was right. The guy that wants to bring back American manufacturing so a regime like this can't hold us hostage, as they did with antibiotics, because we invented them, we came up with it, but we manufacture it over there rather than giving Americans jobs here, and they threaten to withhold those things from us. Who's going to be the guy to push back on that? A fighter like Donald Trump or Joe Biden, who didn't want to kill Osama bin Laden?
Well, I mean, with Biden, it's like, yeah, he's been in the government for 50 years, but all of a sudden he's going to come back and change Washington. It's one of those things where first of all, China's advantage is that they don't care about their people at all, which means they can run sweatshops, which means because of the red tape here in the U.S. government, we want to send our business over there and all this nonsense. They're building these fake or these man-made islands in the South China Sea, trying to push us out like they always have been. And their technology comes basically from stealing from us. One of the major reasons is because that is a direct reflection of political correctness. You don't want to call them out because you're going to get labeled as something, and it's just that simple. No one's going to stand up to China. China's going to lie to us. China sends spies to our universities. We can't say anything again because we don't want to be called racist, but they will do anything they can to win, and not just win for their people. And my problem's not with the Chinese people, it's with the regime, the government, the communists. And for some weird reason, the World Health Organization and especially the mainstream media is all on board with China. If you call them out, you're wrong. When we need to stand.
The World Health Organization's a little bit different. I mean, someone in China. And I'm not saying this happened for certain, but it seems to be the MO around the world that China gets all these contracts and they get all the infrastructure contracts and they get all the rare earth minerals because someone's showing up with a briefcase of cash. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, Jim Jordan, you've seen obviously in Congress what Americans companies have to do to remain compliant, to make sure we're not violating any of those laws. And by the way, for good reason, but how does America stay competitive when China can say, oh yeah, whatever, there are no laws. This is the decision maker in this, banana republic, and we'll go there and congratulations, here's a couple of bucks in the briefcase, and now they won the mineral rights for the next 3,000 years, whether it's cobalt, whether it's oil. I mean, these guys are doing it all over the world, and we're sitting here like morons just watching for it to happen because, if someone their assistant puts a comma in the wrong spot, you're going to jail for 30 years. Talk about it a little bit, because that kind of bureaucracy, and again, if there's one thing that Donald Trump has shown me during the pandemic is that his platform in 2016 of finally saying guys, enough is enough. He's been more right now that we know what happened than ever before.
He sure has. And he was the first president to take on China, and God bless him for doing that. First thing I would do is Congress should be back in session. We talked about that earlier, but the Oversight Committee should be having hearings about the World Health Organization. I got a colleague who says it best. We shouldn't have to pay organizations that hate us. They'll probably do it for free, right? So why in the world are we giving the hard-earned tax dollars to the World Health Organization, and then they come out and shill for China and lie to us? I would bring them in. And then I would say, what did this money go for? What are you doing? And then get to your issue. Why in the world are you shilling for China? Why in the world are you lying to the American people who gave you the most of the money that they have? That we're the biggest contributor to the World Health Organization. So that is priority number one. Why shouldn't we be having hearings on that subject, letting the American people know exactly what took place at that organization, which is a front group and running interference for China? But you're exactly right. The president was the first one to stand up to these guys, and we got to continue to do it and bring that manufacturing back to the United States.
Well, 100%. And my father was right about that. And I'm glad to see, there's going to be some inquiries as well, because, beyond just honestly the pandemic, I mean, we've seen the response. We've seen what the World Health Organization did. We then saw what the media tried to spin it when Donald Trump shut down travel in January. Late January, he shut down travel from Wuhan. Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. Trump is racist. It's too premature. It's too aggressive. In February, they're saying, come to Chinatown. Let's all have mass gatherings. There's nothing wrong here. And now, a few weeks later, they're saying Trump was slow to the gun. I'm saying, wait a minute. You were encouraging mass gatherings. You're saying his response, which probably slowed the spread, flattened the curve, better than anyone. That's racist. And the media just runs with it like, oh, yeah, sure. Those are the DNC talking points. We work for the DNC. Therefore, it must be true. But you bring up a really good point, Jim. It's not just, COVID-19 or the Wuhan China flu. How many professors are literally have been arrested at Harvard in the last year who are taking money from the Chinese government while researching with American grant dollars, trying to get, whether it's technology, whether it's biotech, whatever it may be. I mean, how many of these professors have been caught literally spying for the Chinese government from our biggest institutions of higher learning, many of whom are funded by the U.S. government?
Federal investigators at the Lexington home of 60-year-old Dr. Charles Lieber today, moments after his arrest at his Harvard office.
The complaint alleges that Dr. Lieber signed a contract with the Chinese university in Wuhan and was paid up to $50,000 per month, plus up to $158,000 in living expenses.
The chair of Harvard's chemistry department, he also allegedly received more than $1.5 million to set up a research lab in China.
I mean, I feel like such a moron sometimes when I watch these things, right? The U.S. government and our private companies spend billions, if not trillions, investing, doing research and development, putting things together. China spends about $2. They have a guy hack their computer, steal all the technology. They run with it as though it's theirs. I mean, they're literally starting from our best point, but they're starting at day one, as opposed to us having spent years, decades even, trying to build up this research. And now you have, professors at the biggest institutions in this country, our biggest institutions of higher learning, literally giving the Chinese government our technology as spies because they're not making enough. Like, I guess Liz Warren wasn't making enough, $500,000 a year teaching a class at Harvard once a week.
Don,
what's going on here?
That same university that you referenced, where the professor was arrested, Harvard, less than 24 hours after the president said, give back the $8.6 billion you took in the CARES Act, that money that they took with a $41 billion endowment, that's the university that had this professor doing what you just described. I find that kind of ironic, kind of interesting that it took less than 24 hours when the president called him out on the $8.6 million they took. That was supposed to be money that is designed to help families and small business owners who are hurting during this crisis.
Well, and that's the problem. I mean, meanwhile, they're they're rallying against corporate America, who does employ, 60% of the country. They're doing this. They have a $40 billion endowment, guys. That's a Fortune 500 company by itself. They don't pay any taxes on it. They don't do anything like that because they're an institution of higher learning. So, this is the biggest racket in the world, and they're taking almost $9 million, or tried to take almost $9 million that could have literally fed hundreds of small businesses to keep people employed, to keep the payroll going. Harvard, this institution that certainly doesn't need it, is like, count me in, I'll take it if everyone else can. But they have 50 members of Congress or whatnot, who are literally, alumni. So, they know that no one's going to push back. I'm so glad that my father did. And guys like yourself said, wait a second, guys, like this is designed. How about we give that to a trade school, a vocational school that's actually going to put people, not guys that are going to become researchers and then give it to the Chinese government with our taxpayer dollars. I mean, it's you can't make this crap up anymore. But, I'd like to hear, Tito, talking about this a little bit, because I know you're involved with some of those things and just, small business startups. I know you've done your own stuff with that. I mean, do you think that the small businesses in Huntington Beach, do you think they could have used some of that $9 million rather than Harvard?
I have about 15 friends who have businesses here in Huntington Beach, and they're like, please, we need help. We need help. And I do as much promotion I can on my social media, having takeout, delivery, and so forth, just trying to help out for the local communities that are here. But when you guys talk about the pandemic, you guys talk about the coronavirus and where it comes from and how it was made. Being home as long as I've been over the last 2 months, to be able to go on Google and looking things up, I want to do my research, I want to do my homework, and I want to figure out where this is coming from and how do we fix this epidemic.
The problem I have right now is, and again, as someone who is often censored by social media, you see, if you do, run searches in Google, search Biden in Google and search Trump in Google, you're not going to get the same type of response. So my bigger thing is, honestly, with the tech censorship and all of those things, because again, it's, I'm not going to even, attempt at being a scientist as it relates to these things. But, when I see the social media censorship, I see, guys, Candace Owens is a friend of mine. She got thrown off Twitter last week for asking a question. Other people from the conservative side of the firing line, getting deplatformed, getting censored, getting thrown off. And I look at this as a dry run for 2020. I mean, Rob, have you experienced some of that? Because obviously, you don't take necessarily the political stance all the time, but, as someone who's a warrior, you're out there, you're on TV. I mean, has that affected you much?
Yeah, I've seen it quite a bit with, losing a few followers every now and then on the Twitter accounts and things like that, just because of, generally I like to take Twitter with a grain of salt and maybe a couple glasses of whiskey, so I'll drop an F-bomb or something. Once I get too political, I'll find stuff disappear. I'll lose followers, and people say, well, I can't see you anymore. I unfollowed you without unfollowing you. So, I mean, there's definitely censorship out there. And the thing with Candace Owens, I mean, and again, I don't consider myself way too far right or way too far left. And some of the stuff she says is a little bit far right, but you shouldn't censor someone like her because she's a very thoughtful, very smart woman. And what's wrong with asking a question? What's wrong with this? I mean, even when I talk to people, when I used to do public speaking back when we were allowed to travel in our free country, one of the points that I learned as a Navy SEAL in a lot of stuff is, can you get over it? Great advice for life. Get over it. If you don't like something you see, don't look at it. But there's definitely censorship out there, and it's definitely geared towards the more conservative people. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, you've never heard a leftist complain about being deplatformed, thrown off a platform, and they say some pretty outrageous stuff. And again, I can be, I'm okay. I'm not looking for a conservative platform. I just want to be able to say what I want to say, and they can say whatever they want to say and let people choose. But when someone's getting bombarded with this as though it's truth and this as though it's lies, it's not so fair. Now, Congressman, this is one of the things that I think the conservative right has actually done a terrible job with for far too long, because so many, this sort of conservative mantra was like, no, it's free market. Well, it's not really free market, because, these same tech companies get all sorts of, liability protection, essentially insurance from the U.S. government. And once you take that, it ensures, or it's supposed to, ensure that, hey, you can't be censoring one side or the other, regardless of what you like it, regardless of if it's a little bit of a hot take. It's still sort of the First Amendment. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, it's one of the interesting things that, so many on the right, I was one of the guys, I've been leading the charge on this for 4 years, because I saw it happening to me. I saw, I'd put out a particularly, I don't want to even say hot, but, again, my center for that may be, a little bit off compared to most. But, I didn't think it was that bad. And then, I look at my next 10 tweets and it's like, it's like they took 50% of my followers. And I know they're just screwing with the algorithm to try to hurt me. But, so many conservatives, have never even realized this is a big issue with our base, with our people, because they see it, whether you're religious, whether you're pro-life, if you're a Second Amendment account, God forbid you're a Second Amendment account on Instagram. I mean, you can pay for ads, you can do whatever you want. You're not going to grow your following. That stuff is happening in real time. And, again, I can't tell you what the algorithm says, but I do enough of this stuff and I pay enough attention that if you have a brain, you realize it's going on. And again, it feels like a dry run as they're knocking these sort of people who are conservative thought leaders off, pushing the leftists as hard as they possibly can, knocking the conservatives off to influence the outcome of the 2020 election. What can we do in Congress, right now about this? And obviously it's going to be harder not controlling the House, because the Democrats are more than happy to take, this sort of unfair advantage, that, again, social media, the big search engines, generally anything that comes out of Silicon Valley, There's not even a person saying, like, wait a minute, there may be a little bit of a problem here. They're just like, nothing to see here. It's fine because it's working for us politically.
No, you got to highlight it. You got to have hearings on it. It's tough to do when we're not in the majority. 2 summers ago, I got a call from Matt Gaetz. Y'all know Matt Gaetz, a good friend of ours.
I love Matt Gaetz.
Matt called me up, and all he said on the call, I answered the phone. He says, Jim, Twitter is shadow banning us. And my response was, what's shadow banning? He quickly explained it to me. Turns out Twitter was shadow banning Gaetz, Meadows, Nunes, Jordan. 435 members of the House, 100 in the Senate, 535. They're only shadow banning 4 conservative guys who were focused on exposing what was really going on in the Trump-Russia FBI investigation. Yeah. Jack Dorsey comes out and says it was not intentional. It was just a glitch in our algorithm. And I'm like,
the glitch only, meaning, if you have one glitch one time, I understand. When you have 1,000 glitches 1,000 times and they all go one way, come on, guys. That's not how statistics work. That's not how probability works. And it turns out they were doing it.
I said to someone, oh, what did you put in the algorithm? The names Gaetz, Meadows, Nunes, Jordan. Come on. Of course, it was targeted. Anyone can see that. So, yeah, we had a hearing. We had Adam Carolla and Shapiro come in. They were hilarious. We had another hearing when we were in control last Congress. We had another hearing where we had professors come in and talk about it. And I asked this one professor, we got into all this crazy stuff on campus, a safe space, free speech zones, all this baloney that goes on. They have these things called bias response teams, which are a bunch of tattletales, a bunch of people like Garcetti running around campus telling anyone who says anything politically correct, and you get in trouble and all that stuff. So I asked this one professor in this hearing, I said, Professor, on a college campus, in a safe space, could I say this sentence? This is true. You can go watch the hearing. I said, could I say this sentence? Donald Trump is president. And there was a little pause, and he looked at me, he goes, well, Congressman, it depends. And I interrupted him. I said, it's a fact. There's no it depends about it. He lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. He got 63 million votes. He won an electoral college landslide. He is, in point of fact, the president of the United States. It doesn't matter what you think or what you wanted to have happen. That is the truth. But that's how crazy it has gotten. So all we can do right now is really highlight it, talk about it, do what you're doing now, Don, just talk about this issue and show how absurd the left truly is, especially on college campuses where they all think like Garcetti and de Blasio.
Well, I mean, and let's talk about that, because, again, it's not just from social media. It's also from the mainstream media. I wish that the FEC would look into, the media in general, because they are giving the Democrat Party literally billions in just free advertising, because anything Donald Trump does is wrong. I mean, you'll see he's been the most transparent, most open president. He's doing 2-hour press conferences, no question. Yeah. But they won't air, the 45 minutes where they're asking the real questions about the virus and he's giving a serious response. In the last hour where they're asking the asinine questions, literally, and they'll air the one time where he actually fights back and says, enough. This is, and that's the only part of the conference that Americans get to see. So, this week, or I guess today or yesterday, they're announcing the new Pulitzer Prize winners. Now, the last Pulitzer Prize winners won for a host of topics like Trump, Russia. I'm wondering, how can you have a mainstream media institution that awards themselves awards, but when they turn out they're 100% wrong a year or so later, there's no clawback. There's no taking back that award. I mean, how can these institutions continue to even exist? With the level of bias that they have, where it's really more entertainment than it is, reporting. What do you have with that? I mean, Rob, you've taken some heat. Hard to believe, given sort of the history of the things you've accomplished, the time and dedication you've given to this country. What are your thoughts on the modern day mainstream media? And do you think that these guys will ever get? Will there ever be accountability when they get it totally wrong and run with it as though it's gospel for years? Try to use it to influence elections like the midterms, which probably help cost us the House. All of these sort of things. I mean, when is enough enough? And do regular people get to see that?
Regular people do see more than you think. Like I said, I was a public speaker, and I used to be able to talk to about 10,000 people a week. And it's so nice to see the narrative. First of all, that especially in America, most people are really good people and they get along with each other regardless of political affiliation. But I don't think a lot of the word's going to get out because the media doesn't care anymore about telling the truth. But they want to defeat Donald Trump. That's what they want to do. And it's the hatred. Like we were talking about, Congressman Jordan was talking about earlier, how much we were able to get done with the Democrats and the media totally against Trump. Imagine if we worked together. Imagine if, like, when people ask me, which side am I on?
Hard to believe.
I support America.
Yeah, well, no, I agree. Now, Congressman, I know you're running a little short on time, but, what are your thoughts on that? You've seen some of it. And, Tito, close us out after that. But, again, as someone, you sort of watch TV. And, for me, I've got to be a fly on the wall for the last few years, certainly during the campaign, certainly for a lot of this. For better or worse, that drug me into a whole different world, of pain. Luckily, I inherited, some of my father's masochistic tendencies in that I like to scrap, that way as well. But I mean, you see it every day. I mean, the people that are supposed to be reporting the news are just cheerleaders for the other side. And, I always say, hey, for me, Tito, you're really vocal. You're out there. Rob, you're out there. You're on TV all the time. You're sort of seeing it. You're exposed to it. Jim, you're the recipient of most of their BS, at least the vast majority of the time. And so am I. So I'm saying, fine, we live this stuff 24/7. It's what we do. We choose to be in that thing. But, the average person that's coming home, they just want to feed their family. They're working hard. They're consuming 5 to 10 minutes of news a day. And it's 96% negative against a president that literally broke every economic record known to man. I mean, how can that continue? And, how can that be, under the guise of, a free press? Because it doesn't seem like anything's free about it. They're activists. They're not journalists.
No, the Democrat Party and the mainstream press are one and the same. It's the Democrat Party. Look, they always accuse us of what they're doing. That's just who they are. So we got to call them out every chance we get. And we got to remember that, look, if the press isn't saying something bad about you, you're probably not doing anything any good. That's just who they are. So what I always tell folks is my favorite scripture verse is 2 Timothy 4:7. Fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. Fight, finish, keep. Words of action, words of intensity, words that fit America. Just have that attitude. I think in the end we'll be fine.
Well, those words certainly, really fit for all three of you guys. Tito, I've seen it up close and personal. Sitting, cage side when you're getting it done. Obviously, Congressman, I know from your history as an actual fighter/wrestler versus what I see. The heat that you take, and it's been an honor to get to know you for the last few years being in the fight. As one of the true, guys that just said, hey, I don't care. I don't need to be invited to the cool person party in Washington, D.C. I'm going to say what needs to be said. So I want to thank you for that. And Rob, as a great American, thanks for everything that you guys have always done. Thanks for the friendship as well. By the way, Rob, you actually paid me one of the great compliments of my life, unbeknownst to me at the time. And it was after our little tour in Montana when we were around there for the midterms, helping Greg Gianforte get elected and all that. And we'd spend some time together, and I'd, get on the stump and I'd talk about shooting and all this kind of stuff. And I think it was GQ called you. GQ, not exactly a conservative, magazine, but they called you because they were like, Don Trump Jr. is sitting there talking about guns. Like, what can he possibly know about shooting and this kind of stuff? And I believe the quote that you gave the writer at GQ that was looking to destroy me was, yeah, you probably don't want to go there. It was something to the effect of Don Jr.'s forgotten more about guns than I'll ever know, and ballistics, et cetera. And I was a Navy SEAL sniper, so you probably don't want to use that as a line of attack. So, other compliments don't mean much to me. That was the one that I'm locking that one in the vault. That's one of the greats of all time, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, that came out because when we were driving through Utah doing a couple things for some Hunter Nation, and we were talking ballistics, and there was a point where I had to get out my phone so I could look at Google. I'm like, I think he's right. I'm the Fifth Avenue redneck. So while I may hail from the mean streets of New York City, I actually get out there and do these things, and spend most of my time in
I would rather spend it outside of the coast, out there shooting. So, but I appreciate it, and I never thanked you for that one actually. But I saw it, I was like, wow, that's one of the great sort of compliments of my life. And so I'll take this time now. But you guys have all been great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your friendship. Appreciate the fight that is in all of you. You guys are awesome. Thanks for coming on and doing this, and I look forward to doing it again many more times.
Outstanding.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.